Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Hot Pursuit.
I guess
nice to see you.
It's great to see you. You look fantastic.
Oh, thanks.
I don't know if my Zoom, for some reason, I look very red, but I'm not.
It's
burned.
just the lighting, you know?
What a day. Yesterday, today,
God.
probably tomorrow. Like, wow, these tariffs. I mean,
Chaos.
It's a new world order.
It's exhausting.
I
mean, my nerves are shot.
From my point of view as a journalist, like, it's so exciting, you know? But I look at my 401k and I'm like, no.
I know. I can't believe that, like, they went through with it. He went through with it. Because we've been hearing about this going to happen. And he kind of like, all right, well, we'll see. Because everything has been so volatile anyway.
True. Everyone
and
was
he
like,
actually did it.
Everybody was like, it's so surprising. And I'm like, what? He's been telling us the whole time.
But, that really doesn't mean much sometimes.
I always think of the Far Side cartoon where the two people are looking up at the billboard of the two sheep are looking up at the billboard of the wolf. Mm-hmm. And one sheep says to the other, I like him because he says what he's thinking. And the wolf is saying, I'm going to eat you. You know?
Yes. I love the Far Side.
He's been telling us, like, he's going to eat us. And here it is. It's incredible.
Yes. So I spent the whole week leading up to this writing a story about how classic car collectors and brokers and shippers and logistics specialists and legal authorities were all freaking out because going into the week, Trump had not announced any exemptions and had said specifically there will be no exemptions on the 25% automotive tariffs that he was going to enact effective April 3rd, which is today. And that goes for cars and parts coming into the country, a flat 25% tariff. So everyone
unless they're USMCA compliant.
Yes, in which case they will be taxed only on the percentage of parts that are not American. So if a car is coming in with 25% US parts, it'll be taxed on the rest. It'll be taxed on the 75% that are not American. All that to say, there wasn't any exemption written in for classic cars, which would have been a really big deal because that means that if you're buying something at RM Sotheby's upcoming sale in Milan, like you've got a Aston Martin that you've got your eye on, like our buddy Steve Serio told me, that tacks on another 25% to what you're going to pay, and that kind of kills the deal because why would you pay that premium? You just wouldn't. It also meant that people who were going to consign cars to sales in the U.S., to auctions or whatever, especially in Monterey, were pulling their cars already from the auctions because why would you pay another 25% to sell your car? It just doesn't make sense. The good news is, as of yesterday afternoon, I did see some guidance that was sent around to from customs to shippers that said that there will be an exemption for cars that are 25 years or older. Now, that doesn't mean that cars that are 15 years old won't also be taxed, which is kind of tough because what about the cool Mercedes and JDMs that we want to get over here to collect? They're still collectible. They're just not old. So that's the
Radwood cars.
Exactly. So that's kind of an issue. But the flip side of that, which is kind of good for us, is that potentially it means that any of these collectible cars that are already in the U.S. are going to be worth more. Because if the importation of these cars slows down, it's kind of good if we already have our own collectible cars.
Well, and I wonder how.
More.
So there's a lot of moving parts here, but basically, so classic cars will not be. They will be exempt from the 25% auto tariff that goes into effect today. We're recording this on April 3rd.
Yes. If they're older than 25 years old.
If they're older than 25 years old, they will be exempt from that 25% tariff. If they're coming from Europe, for example, they will still be subject to a 2.5% tariff.
Yes, and that has always been the case.
Yes, but my question is, on Saturday, when the 10% blanket tariffs go into effect, I guess those will apply to classic cars as well. And then on Wednesday, when the additional tariffs go into effect, 20%, for example, on the EU, are those going to hit like classic car? If you import like a 1964 911 from Stuttgart, are you going to have to pay next week, at the end of next week, basically 20 or 30% on that car?
The answer to that is no. As of today, to my best understanding, because I did read the executive order that was released yesterday, when they are talking about the reciprocal tariffs.
Right.
And that order said some goods will not be subject to the reciprocal tariff. These include steel and aluminum articles and automotive parts already subject to tariffs. So at least with the reciprocal tariffs,
right,
autos and automotive parts will not be subject. Now, when the flat 10%, that's a little unclear.
I guess, does that replace the 2.5% that currently
See, that's a good question.
Wow. So a little bit confusing, but for the most part, it does look like you're going to get exemptions if you're buying cars over 25 years old.
And yeah, I mean, that's not me, but it's a lot of people.
Well, you might. Yeah. What if you find a Camargue?
Yeah, there are great Camargues overseas. They're all right-hand drive, but that's fine. I can get behind it. I will say I talked with one shipper told me at Silver Tiger Logistics, he said they bring over about 1,000 cars a year, and they regularly have flights that the value of the cars on the single flight is over $100 million.
Wow.
So this is, I mean, it seems niche, but it's a lot of money and a lot of goods that would have been subject to this. So.
Yeah. I mean, by the way, I was at the MotoGP races in Austin last weekend, and it strikes me, and I'm sure you see this at other, for example, at Formula One, it strikes me that if you've got it down to a science, packing up and shipping vehicles is so easy.
Completely.
Right? They've got boxes already built, and they just roll the chassis in, cinch it down, close the box, and it goes into a container perfectly. So completely.
Like theoretically, you could have it done with a single phone call.
Right. Well, I'm just saying, like Silver Tiger or
or cars.
They do it all the time.
Yes.
So
constantly.
For them, it's not a big deal. If you're one person and it's the first time you've ever done it, then it's kind of a pain. But if you're doing it regularly, so very interesting stuff. We're going to talk, by the way, to Chris Bryant, who is a Bloomberg opinion writer and one with whom I worked for many years in Berlin. Very smart guy.
That's so cool. I still need to go to Berlin. I've never been. But yeah, Chris Bryant is one of my favorite columnists at Bloomberg. I have notices attached to his columns, so I read them whenever they come out. And he's really good at tying in the business side, the product side, putting it all in context. And yeah, he's great.
I've been struck by his columns lately. I've been struck by his knowledge of these kind of niche products. I mean, you are a hypercar expert because that's your job, but Chris is like an editorial writer for a financial news organization. So it's pretty cool that he knows,
it's awesome.
For example, that the Valhalla has much improved interior, so
yeah. You know what I like too? I firmly believe that the products of any given automotive company speak to the company. So when you get into a certain product and you're noticing things, those are they're a distant, but they're a direct result of what is happening within the company, structurally and financially. And you can draw a straight line. And when I read Chris, he completely clarifies what's going on internally at the company that I see in the product. Yeah. I mean, there is a correlation, and it's so cliche to say, but there's a direct correlation between what is going on within the behind closed doors at certain companies and the end product, and that's always true.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been loving his stuff lately as well. I too have an alert set on my Bloomberg so that I can get his column sent directly to me. Let's get into it. Chris Bryant from Berlin.
Chris, thanks for joining us. I want to go right into your column today.
Me too. I'm so glad you wrote that. And this is the first time I actually understand the ownership structure of Porsche Bugatti Rimac. I've never gotten
It's
it
so
before.
confusing.
Same.
Until I read
So
your
weird.
story. Yeah.
I mean, can I just jump in and ask for me, the biggest question, which is, I don't think Porsche needs Bugatti. And I feel like that's kind of where you landed in your column. But I don't see what Bugatti gives Porsche at this point.
Well, I mean, it's a topic that I was wrestling with, and just to catch people up. I mean, there's now sort of discussions basically that Mate Rimac, this amazing Croatian entrepreneur, would like to, in conjunction with investors, maybe take over the half of Bugatti Rimac that Porsche owns. And I don't know. I mean, Porsche is really under pressure. They need to be more luxury. They need to sell more expensive vehicles, and they have this amazing asset that they never talk about, that you kind of never really hear very much about. And Mate Rimac's been getting on with the job for the last 3-4 years. And then suddenly, these tensions have emerged, and it seems like Porsche maybe wanted to take over the joint venture, and now maybe he does, and it's all a bit unclear. But I can't help thinking, they've got this great asset that produces vehicles that are, highly sought after, that people have to, clamor to get hold of, and they might sell it. I mean, I don't know. I did come down on the side of the argument, that maybe they should, just because there aren't enough commonalities with the rest of the Porsche business, and that making hypercars, we can talk about that, the economics of that are not always great.
Well, let me ask you really pointedly, what is your sense about Porsche's plan to develop the hypercar successor, something in addition to the 918 Spider? And is there a sense that Porsche had hoped to leverage Bugatti intelligence, infrastructure, whatever else, in order to develop the new hypercar, which obviously we haven't seen and has sort of disappeared?
Yeah, we've not seen it, right? I mean, I think the original plan for Porsche was, we saw this Mission X hypercar that they developed, an all-electric hypercar that I think they showed a couple of years back.
2023?
Yeah, back then it probably seemed like a smart idea. Of course, now, a lot can happen in a couple of years, and even Mate Rimac, who developed the Rimac Nevera, which, broke all kinds of records as a all-electric hypercar, had some comments last year along the lines of, well, it's not really selling as much as we hoped. Many of the customers in this bracket who are buying a seven-figure car, they feel that electric hypercars lack the kind of emotion. They still want a combustion engine, all the rest of it. And, even hinted that he might not develop another one. And so if I was Porsche, probably looking at that space now, I might have reservations about bringing an all-electric hypercar to market. And therefore, if they have to go back to the drawing board, then it could take a long time. And that's why, some people thought, well, maybe Bugatti could help fill that gap. I mean, if they took control of that joint venture, then they'd sort of instantly have a hypercar in the portfolio. They wouldn't have to develop a new one. And Hanno, I think you were there, like the new Tourbillon is a very impressive vehicle, no?
Yeah, it's amazing, and I think they've sold out. And yet, just as you say, Rimac, and let's not forget Pininfarina with their electric Battista, which is also using Rimac components. Like, now is not the time to be selling an electric hypercar. My question for Porsche is, why do they not pivot to a hybrid, supercar, something like their 919, the Le Mans prototype that they've already developed? Why not just move that into production?
The 918 was a hybrid too, right?
Yeah. I mean, to me, that would make a lot of sense. And from, what I hear on the ground from collectors is that Porsche was accepting statements of intent and really trying to drum up buyers for this Mission X, this hypercar. Now, last year I asked Porsche what's going on, what's the latest, can you confirm or deny? And of course, they don't want to confirm or deny where they are in the program. But they did say, we've never accepted deposits because what we showed in 2023 was only a concept. Therefore, they have plausible deniability that it's not like they canceled anything if they didn't commit to anything in the first place. But if you talk to, high-end buyers and collectors, they all say, oh yeah, Porsche's been, offering me allocations for this and I didn't want it because it was electric. Which begs the question, then why not simply pivot and make it a hybrid? Because they've already got a hybrid prototype that's, has the numbers for it.
Yeah,
performance
I mean, I
wise.
think they absolutely should do. Of course, I think that, always the story with hypercars is, can you develop them at a reasonable cost? Because clearly you've always got to be trying to stretch the boundaries of the possible, and that always is a challenge. And of course, what's really hard right now is that they just have this competitor who seems to have cracked it, right, with Ferrari. I mean, say what you like about the F80. Personally, I'm not a big fan. I know a lot of people have mixed opinions about that vehicle, but it's going to be an absolute cash machine for Ferrari. They're all sold out, 799 units, so that's a lot more than they produced. It's a lot more than they produced with the LaFerrari. They managed to allocate them all very quickly. I dare say they, in a couple of years, will come out with a Spider version as well, a few hundred of those. So they're going to make, billions of revenue with that, and analysts think very high margin. And so if Porsche's not able to do that, if they came with a hypercar and then it wasn't very profitable, for example, that would be, disastrous too. So a really difficult one. I get the feeling that the fact that it hasn't happened, reflects either challenges on the engineering side, or the powertrain front is a question. And then simply they've just got so much on their plate at the moment. Their electric strategy is not, kind of gone up in smoke. China's strategy too. So, trying to get all those things in line, I think maybe it's like too much, and the thing that's like not happened yet.
I want to just say that the F80 being sold out at those prices just proves the fact that rich people have more money than sense. I mean, people are just throwing money at it because it's Ferrari. And I think probably those buyers are not true car lovers. Because
how can you say that? How can you
what
say
is it?
that?
It's a 1.3 liter four-cylinder.
Are you seeing the same car that I'm seeing?
Yeah, it's awful. The powertrain is what I see.
It's awesome.
I see the weak powertrain.
What are you talking about?
Is it a V6 even? Or is it only 4 cylinders? Who knows? Let
me tell you what
as
it
soon
is.
as I read the
it's
details.
900 horsepower. It does. I don't.
But that doesn't
I'm
matter.
not going to
really
get under
matter.
the hood and count the cylinders. I mean, I can't even. None of us on this call right now could drive that car to its full capacity because we're not professional
that's the truth
drivers.
About so many cars. And look, I've driven many cars that have huge horsepower numbers, but they're hybrids and they have a 2-liter 4-cylinder, and they're just not pleasing vehicles to drive. The horsepower doesn't matter anymore. That's why something like a Rimac hypercar makes me feel a little bit sick. I mean, it's just a soulless waste of money. And the only people who want something like that are like Lewis Hamilton, because he just has so much money and doesn't care that much about the experience
I would
of
withhold
driving.
judgment until you've driven it, my friend. I guarantee you.
Fair.
If you drove it, you would be screaming with joy and pleasure.
Well, not
Another
if I
great
also
clip.
paid for it, right? Because I would much rather have something that has true character, and I sincerely doubt that does. Although you're right, I haven't driven it. I want to step back, though, for a moment and walk through just the ownership structure of Bugatti Rimac, because I don't think, Chris, that a lot of people understand it. And I think after reading your column, I do for the first time. So basically, Porsche owns a 45% stake in the joint venture of Bugatti Rimac, and Rimac owns the other 55%. But Porsche owns 20% of Rimac. So in a sense, they actually own more. And I wonder if this is just a legacy of Wolfsburg. Like, are the Germans just into these incredibly complex ownership structures, or is there any kind of reason for that?
Well, I mean, Matt, you know the history as well as I do. This used to be owned by Volkswagen. It was Ferdinand Piech, his baby. He is the one who rescued Bugatti, developed the Veyron, the great expanse, really, brought it up to the modern era. And then, of course, we had Dieselgate. We had, Herbert Diess, the CEO, came in with all the electric strategy, and Bugatti didn't really seem to fit in that structure anymore. And as discussed, it didn't have the economies of scale, the shared parts, and all the rest of it. And so they found this sort of neat solution. They saw Marty Rimac, and to be honest, I always think, my goodness me, he'd already had investment from Porsche into his, component maker and all the rest of it in his Rimac group. But then they suddenly came to him and said, hey, you can have Bugatti. The guy was 33 years old. I mean, it's incredible. And that's what they did, because at the time, he developed the Nevera. And the expectation was that he would then develop basically an electric Bugatti, I think. That was the feeling back then, the future for Bugatti was going to be electric too, and he would essentially make a kind of electric version of the Chiron. Now, thank goodness he didn't, but yeah, as a result, you have this structure with, the stake got passed to Porsche. Porsche went public, and so then you had 45% on the Porsche side, 55 on the Rimac side, with importantly Marty Rimac as the CEO. So he's the one driving the force there. And to be honest, I mean, he's made some good decisions. As I say, he didn't develop an all-electric Bugatti. I think that would have been a mistake in hindsight. So it's a hybrid, the Tourbillon. It's a good decision. Developed a relatively low cost. He's got Cosworth, providing the engine. I think, you won't have any problems on the cylinder count with that engine, Matt. There's 16 of them, I think. So, ticks that box for you. And so, yeah, in theory, it's going okay. But, actually, if you look at the financials, which I did in the Porsche accounts, they lost money last year and their sales tumbled almost 50%. Now, that's partly because of just the model cycle. The Chiron ran out. The Tourbillon's not arrived yet. They've got a couple of vehicles, a convertible and a track-only car that will tide them over for a bit. But nevertheless, there are probably some things that Porsche and Bugatti didn't, Porsche and Rimac didn't entirely agree on. And the result is now you have this sort of tug of war between the two of them.
I would say, to your point about Mate Rimac, he is a really interesting individual. And just listening to you to describe this timeline, there's somebody else who's been in the car world, who's been very young, who's been a disruptor with electric cars, and that person was Elon Musk. And I remember interviewing Elon 12 years ago before he became who he is now, and watching and speaking with Mate over the past few years. It's almost like Mate is the antithesis. He's the other side of the same coin of Elon, where this is someone who's very young, incredibly intelligent, and a disruptor. Of course, Mate is doing it in a different way, but I do think it's really interesting to watch him develop. And I don't really know what my point is with this, other than to say I don't think this is the last act of Mate by any means.
Well, certainly not if he is able to buy Bugatti. I mean,
yeah.
I think one of the things that struck me most about your story, Chris, is that the price seems so low, right? Isn't it €1 billion or thereabouts?
This is what Bloomberg News has reported, as a total value for Bugatti Rimac. That does seem low, but there are reasons, right? I mean, if you think about actually how much revenue they make in a year, this is a joint venture. They sell 100 cars a year. Now, okay, fine, those cars are
$4 million
priced
a
at
piece,
3-4 million, but that's still only 300-400 million euros of revenue. Plus, as I say, they don't actually make money at the moment. Now, that should change with the Tourbillon, but in that sense, pure financials, not going to be worth that much. However, of course, as we know, hypercar companies are, of course, highly sought after as trophy assets. And you've seen a lot of them change hands, notably McLaren recently. So I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who'd be very interested in acquiring that stake, because clearly Mate Rimac would need some financial backers if he wanted to purchase that stake.
That's what, by the way, Volkswagen paid for Ducati as well, was €1 billion. And I think the difference between, to me, what Porsche does and Bugatti does, Porsche makes these near perfect, beautiful machines. Bugatti makes artwork that you can drive at an incredibly high speed. So I feel like there's a value to Bugatti beyond just the revenue. And I don't think that 3x revenue or even 2x in a year or two, with prices going this direction, is that high a price to put on it. But you're the expert, right? Because you're the one looking at these car companies all day long at the financials and then, typing along in our Berlin office.
This is not, I'm sure that's not the end of the story. And my argument today was that, Porsche is under no pressure to accept any offer presented to them. They don't have to sell. In fact, they could have good reasons to retain it. If they thought that, taking up control of Bugatti and therefore, bringing that into the Porsche fold, talking about it regularly was going to improve their valuation, and, just even like a sprinkle of Bugatti on on their share price could be worth, billions in market value, because, stock market valuations for car companies, they're not entirely logical. Ferrari, a company that is doing excellent job, but it makes 14,000 cars a year and is now, the most valuable European automaker, worth more than Volkswagen, which makes 9 million cars a year and owns Lamborghini and Bentley. So you can't say, well, it's just because, of luxury or whatever. Some of this stuff is just sort of almost like magic. And so I would imagine there might have been people at Porsche who thought, maybe if we did more with Bugatti, we could have some of that kind of Ferrari valuation magic too.
It's so un-German, though, isn't it, Hannah? Bugatti. It's French. They have a castle.
They have a castle.
It's like, Porsche should have like a Bauhaus cement box in which they build their machines. It just doesn't.
They do have a nice museum.
Yeah, it's nice, but it's like modern architecture, all angles and straight lines, and it just doesn't seem very Bugatti-esque.
Can we pivot a little bit, Chris, and ask how tariffs are going to affect all of what we've just discussed? And maybe this isn't a pivot, it's more of a segue. The addition of 25%, at this point, 25% automotive tariffs, does that change the proposition for what Porsche is trying to do and how Porsche is pivoting? And also within relief to Ferrari, which we're calling a competitor, and I know you guys tend to when you're analyzing these companies, but is it really a competitor? Ferrari just seems to be quiet in their own, the Porsche,
in a league of their own.
Right. And let's be honest, like historically, Porsche is a very sort of humble, just sporty track car. They've never been Ferrari. So sometimes when I read about Porsche being a competitor for Ferrari, I'm kind of like, well, no, they're not at all. But that's not a value judgment. It's just like Ferrari is in a whole other echelon and always has been.
I agree with everything you've just said, but I think the thing that's changed is Ferrari has managed to move into even more of its own league, right? Over the past couple of years. When it became public company, probably about a decade ago now, I don't think anybody would have dreamed of the kind of stock market value and the kind of profitability that they've really managed to generate now. And I think that's obviously inspired everybody else in the industry who thinks, well, we can have a bit of that too. Mm-hmm. But when then you look at the pricing power, I mean, really, Ferrari is moving away now. Average price per vehicle of more than 400,000 euros, so a similar amount in dollars. And Porsche down on kind of 115,000 euros. So again, like similar amount of dollars. It's a huge gap. And so, yes, when tariffs happen, they're obviously much more of a problem for Porsche than they are for Ferrari. Ferrari came out straight away, I think, within hours and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to honor our contracts on your 296 that you ordered 2 years ago. But the new models, your 12-cylinder, the price is going to go up by 10%, I think is what they said.
I mean, truly, will anybody even blink at that?
I sit somewhere in the middle of this debate. I think that Ferrari is getting close to the point where customers will care. And clearly your Ferrari collector who has 30, 40 cars, who buys the F80, not because they love the car, but because they want the SP4 when that comes. These people, they'll just, they take the hit. It's not about the money, and they'll be fine. But they still have to sell a decent amount of range cars every year. And if those vehicles really start to depreciate, and they are now, like if you bought an SF90 or a 296, you're sitting on quite a loss. And you feel like you've got to do that again and again. And then they increase the price of the next car. Then you are starting to hit a limit there. And so, yeah, we're talking about very privileged people who, anybody who can buy a Ferrari is already doing fine in life. So, small violence. But at the same time, it is a threat to the business model. And very interestingly as well, one thing that Ferrari has been doing that, again, everybody else in the industry is trying to do is personalization. And I mentioned it again today. Your tourbillon will cost you $4 million, but, add on another million by the time you've spec'd it, right? And what Ferrari's been saying recently is actually these customized options, the $25,000 paint job, these are the things that when you come to sell a vehicle that the secondhand customer is not willing to pay for. because why would I, pay that, which is frankly an absurd price to pay for a paint job.
Sure.
For a secondhand car that wasn't, a color that I chose because it matched my, yacht or whatever. And this is contributing to the depreciation, just to finish the thought, that basically, yeah, if Ferraris start to depreciate more because people are speccing them a lot, then that's a bit of a threat to the business model ultimately.
That's a sad fact of buying custom vehicles or adding aftermarket accessories. The next buyer is not willing to pay for those almost ever. I wonder about the other car makers and how they'll be hit with tariffs. We've already heard from Volkswagen today that they've got cars on boats that they're not going to ship right now. They're holding them in port, and that they're going to charge an import fee on those cars that do get to the U.S. and get the tariff. So do you know anything more from other automakers? I mean, how is this going to affect the global industry?
Have you got 6 hours for me to answer that question? I mean, yeah, it's an absolute nightmare, like, for everybody. There's nobody who's not affected. The Ford F-150 or whatever, produced in America, but full of, foreign parts. And so, it is a headache. But of course, the German automakers, including Porsche, who bring cars over from Europe, are really, going to struggle here. The thing that I really bothers me is that, American cars in particular were already far too expensive. The average price, where are we, remind me, $45,000, $50,000, something like that. And now what's going to happen is that those affordable models, many of which were being brought in from South Korea or from Mexico and so forth, relatively smaller cars, very thin margins, those are the ones that are going to, suffer and ultimately will probably be cut. And some of them maybe will be able to shift to the United States, but there's a reason they weren't being produced in the United States, because it was too expensive. And so if you stop being able to provide new vehicles to middle class, ordinary consumers, then, it's not a good situation for the industry. I think it's really sad, frankly.
How soon do you expect that we are going to see real effects of this? I mean, aside from just when we go down to the dealership and try to buy a new car, I'm talking effects in terms of the mix on the road of American cars versus foreign-made cars. I mean, are we going to see a change a year from now?
I mean, I do think it'll take some time to feed through. I mean, the tariffs came into force today, but we've still got, to wait a bit for the the part situation. Just in the last few minutes, actually, we've had Canada come out and say that we're going to do, basically the same to the United States that the US has done to us. And we'll have to, wait and see what other kind of retaliation we'll have as a result of this as well. So I don't think we've heard the last of it yet. But I mean, this, to be blunt, is going to be severe, and it's going to be really, really tough on this industry. If the hope is that car makers are going to reshore production, then you want these car makers to be profitable. And instead, they're going to take massive hits to their earnings, which is earnings that they can't invest. And I recognize that, the United States was importing a lot of cars. Roughly half of the US production was being imported. But at the same time, it was, considered to be a good thing that Mexico, Canada, and the United States had created this kind of automotive plane where people could trade, and supply chains were set up accordingly. And to just overnight say, "Nope, we're not doing that anymore," is to, cause huge problems for the industry.
I would guess, by the way, Hannah, that the mix shifts in terms of used cars and new cars. Because to Chris's point, the affordable cars that were dragging the average price down to $45,000 or $50,000, they won't be sold here anymore, or they won't.
Potentially, I mean,
Mercedes
they
won't be that cheap.
Said
right?
That. Did you see that piece?
Yes, but yeah. I think the American cars that you would think more people would have to buy are just so exorbitantly expensive. I was looking yesterday at a Chevy Suburban, and if you want the 6.2 liter V8, it starts at $86,000.
That's a lot of money.
Wow.
That's like supposed to be a middle class family vehicle, right? But it's twice as much as like the average income in flyover country. So I just can't believe people are going to be able to buy new cars anymore, and you won't be
Yeah,
able to find the little inexpensive ones from Korea.
we've heard this record before too. I mean, this is essentially what happened in the pandemic, right? The price of new vehicles went up, the supply went down, and the used market exploded and prices rose. And I'm sure we're going to see a similar thing again, where people are, as you say, forced out of the new market and have to buy used. And that's going to, put pressure on prices again, i.e., it's going to create inflation. And I'm not sure that's what we want.
Chris, is there any sense that there will be like a flip-flop, for lack of a better word, that a year from now, President Trump and this administration are going to say, actually, never mind, we're going back to what it was before?
Wait, you doubt the stability of President Trump's policies?
I mean, just a question. Next year or next week, is there any likelihood of that?
I wish I had a crystal ball, but I would say this. I think Trump has been relatively consistent, not just about tariffs, but particularly about the auto industry. He's always had a bone to pick with, car imports, specifically German ones, for example. This has been a constant, and the fact that, we didn't have more, radical tariffs in the first time, I don't think it should blind us to the fact that this has been something that he's been wanting to do for a while, I think. And so, no, I don't really expect, a massive climb down from this. As we've seen today, I mean, you've had a terrible reaction in the markets to, Liberation Day tariffs, stocks melting down, the dollar, selling off. And, I used to think of Trump as the kind of, the president of sort of business in the stock market who judged himself by the fact that, stocks went up, right? And now doesn't seem to care about any of that anymore. And, his hope, of course, I should mention this to be fair, is to, return manufacturing to the United States and create jobs and all the rest of it. But, these people who, work in manufacturing plants also need to be able to afford cars.
I just kept thinking, I mean, on the one hand, I guess union wages are around $80 an hour, which is good. But you're still not going to be able to buy a Suburban. It's just going to be out of their reach. So let's bookend this discussion with Aston Martin. I think it's great to start with a Porsche and Bugatti. Stop in the middle to talk about middle class cars and tariffs, and then
affordable cars. Now back to the luxury one.
So, and I just I have heard Lawrence Stroll's pitch for why Aston Martin should be worth more, and I leave there saying, like, yeah, man, he's totally right. It should be worth at least, like half of a Ferrari valuation. But I think you pointed out in when you wrote a column about this a couple days ago that it's only like 1% of Ferrari's valuation. And what is the problem with Aston Martin? Because even if you find flaws here and there with their vehicles, they're still like iconic cars that I think most people would love to drive or even own.
I think if you hit the nail on the head, I mean, I think there is a lot of passion for this brand. I think they do produce very highly desirable vehicles, and yet somehow they always contrive to kind of get it wrong. And part of that was, I think, the original IPO was a little oversold, a lot of hype. They went public at a kind of 4 billion valuation, and then they learned that, supply and demand, they've always had a bit of a job to get that right. They wanted to grow. Stroll, for example, had this target. He wanted to get to 10,000 units a year. I think they sold 6,000 last year. And you've had these periods throughout the Aston history where you get the kind of build-up of stock on dealer forecourts. And that then causes all kinds of problems. You have to reduce prices, or it hits the residual values and so forth. And then you have to sort it out again. So currently they're in the process of trying to balance supply and demand again, which means reducing wholesales and all the rest of it. And, it contributes to this kind of stop-start profit warning here, there, capital raise, again and again. And, Stroll, again, he's a billionaire many times over from his days in the fashion world. But I don't think he probably expected to have to put as much money as he's had to put into Aston Martin as he's done. I think now his consortium is, it's about 600 million of change they put in now. Hopefully that'll be the end of it. with the 50 million he put in this week. But again, back to your evaluation point, he owns a Formula One team as well, which carries the same name. And I mean, look at what's happened to F1 team valuations now. I think his Aston Martin team, which is, by no means the most expensive, has a 1.8 billion pound enterprise value or something, which, we're talking 3 times what this car company that sells, thousands of vehicles a year and employs I don't know how many people. There's a huge gulf there now. And clearly, that's partly because the economics of F1 have changed. I mean, F1 teams now make money. They didn't before. They're the huge trophy assets, the story, US fans of racing, all the rest of it. Whereas the car industry remains capital intensive, periods of pricing difficulty, supply demand, and all the rest of it. And yeah, Aston's had some problems too. That they haven't always got everything right technically. Coming back to our hypercar discussion, I mean, they produced the Valkyrie. Goodness me! I mean, I think
Gorgeous.
one person involved in that project said it almost bankrupted the company.
What a
it
beauty,
was,
though.
yeah. I mean, wow. Yeah,
That's a hot
but I mean,
car.
if you do things like that, and they really, really push the boat on that one, then you have problems, and clearly that they had all kinds of engineering difficulties with that, I think. But now the next one is the Valhalla, which is kind of like I think they refer to it as sort of like a hypercar at supercar price, and
Son
I
of
think delivery.
Valkyrie, they call it. Not nearly as nice.
Wow, there you go. Let's just hope that they have an easier job producing that vehicle because that'll be a real test for the company now. And they've got this sort of very sensible sounding, very reliable CEO now who did a great job at Bentley. Bentley was
Adrian
another one that
Hallmark.
like never used to make money for Volkswagen and now is making 20% profit margins, which is, great. And they hope he'll be able to repeat the magic at Aston. But I don't know. People have been burned so many times by this company, not just recently in its stock market history, but before that, so I think 7 times bankrupt or whatever.
While we're on the topic of Adrian, he's coming from this very disciplined German ownership company and of course very conservative Bentley and everything very nice guy. Everything I hear about him is he's great in a crisis. Does that model, will that work at Aston Martin? I mean, it's a completely different culture. And, from what I hear, they really desperately do need discipline. So now they've got their discipline daddy in Adrian Hallmark. Is that gonna work?
Well, I think it will, as long as they let him get on with the job. I mean, my impression, maybe it's a bit unfair, was that, Lawrence Stroll, he's executive chairman and maybe like to kind of get involved quite a lot. And they really just need to let Adrian do his thing. I think they will now, and I think we had a good Bloomberg News feature on the company a couple of months ago where they said exactly that they were going to give him freedom to kind of you know execute his plan now, which is all very straightforward, sensible stuff. Not like spending a fortune developing new vehicles all the time, but trying to produce derivatives, trying to push the personalization thing that they're already doing pretty well on, by the way. They're at like, I think 18% of revenue from personalization. Now that's kind of Ferrari levels. They're probably not getting the same kind of pricing, but do you know what I mean? They're well advanced down that path. And so they can do that and get these programs delivered on time, not have dealers clogged with inventory again. They've got a brand new lineup of vehicles now, all of them being refreshed, including the DBX, which is their SUV, which I'm not a huge fan of, but they've done a good job now with the refresh. I think the interior looks better.
Hey,
This
what
is
don't you like?
Seven's good. I
What
like
don't
the
you like about
707.
that? We love it.
you love the DBX SUV. Well, I don't like any of
707.
these.
I mean, I think it's really fun to drive. It's sounds great, feels great. As you say, the interior has been updated and is pretty fantastic. I guess the price
Yeah,
tag's
and
high.
look, but they're currently only selling, I think, 3 or 4 thousand of them a year. I mean, I think the Bentiaga, which is also a matter of taste, but that sells a lot more, and that's key to the economics of these companies. That's been obviously very, very important for all of these companies that they have SUVs that sell And I think Aston needs to do more with its own one, hopefully by, better marketing and so forth, that they can boost the volumes of that, because that was obviously be very instrumental in driving a return to profits, which is what we need to see. I mean, this is a company that just has lost money,
Yeah.
burnt
For
cash
years.
ever since the IPO for years.
Yeah.
And they're promising this year, end of this year, finally, we're going to be profitable and we're going to generate cash.
I mean,
If they
yeah.
can do that for a few quarters, things could change.
It is kind of like you're in this dysfunctional relationship where it's just like, just lie to me one more time. And I'll still believe you because you're beautiful, because the cars are beautiful, and
Yeah.
we all want it to succeed, and it's such a known thing, and we love James Bond and all of these things, and we just take it because we want to believe.
I've dated Aston Martin before, and I wanted to break up for like years. It took me years to finally get the courage to leave her. But yeah, I think, first of all, I want to say that the Bentayga, like, objectively is fugly, right? And the
Aston Martin looks far better than the
Yes,
Bentayga.
yeah.
Bar none. I mean, no comparison. We can agree on that.
Yes, we all agree, I think. I also wanted to point out, just as an aside, there are a couple interesting connections between the Bugatti Tourbillon and the Aston Martin Valkyrie, right? Cosworth makes, or at least worked on, both of the internal combustion engines, and Rimac clearly did both of the electric drivetrains. So that's pretty cool that we can get from one to the other.
Well, this ties into another sort of bookend question that I wanted to ask Chris was, when we're talking about these, hypercars that are the halo cars for the brand, whether it's the Tourbillon or the Valkyrie and Valhalla or whatever hypercar Porsche is or is not making, obviously the fans want those. But to your point, Chris, in your column about Bugatti, those are loss leaders often. So what is the rationale at these companies, whether it's Aston Martin or Porsche, to make a halo hypercar that they might lose money on, but then maybe it generates value and hype for the brand in other ways? Can you walk us through that? Because at this point, it's like, well, if you're losing money, why make them?
Well, I think that's right, Hannah. And I think the point is that, like, it isn't always a loss leader, right? You can make good money. And I was looking, for example, look at Koenigsegg, right? They've managed to really, turn around a good business now. And I think they probably have hopes for producing higher volumes. They're even making, I believe, a four-seater hypercar now. Gemera.
Yes.
And, it's not, obviously not making billions, but like, I think they are profitable. And they've done that under huge constraints, capital constraints, and the fact that these vehicles, they have to build them and get them homologated, which means, they've got to pass all the rules and regulations surrounding emissions and safety and all the rest of it. Really hard nut to crack. But the promise is the Ferrari thing, right? If you can industrialize that process and you can get people queuing up to buy these cars, and now Ferrari have got this e-factory where they're able to churn out, a huge amount of space and develop it, and not just, of course, the hypercars. So, if you really get the business model churning, then you have a vehicle like the SP3, which is not the height of technology. It's not about being like the absolute, best of the best high performance. So you can make huge margins on a car like that, because actually, if I'm honest, if you gave me the choice tomorrow, and I hope somebody will, between an F80 or an SP3, I would take the SP3. And that would have been a really good bet. Because, of course, those cars now, I believe they were like a couple of million new, and now they're trading up, I was told the other day, by a dealer like 2 or 3 million over.
This is the drug that everyone's chasing, isn't it?
That's what they want.
Yeah.
And so people are buying the F80 just to get the SP4, or because they just have to have the F80 in their collection. So if you could develop a business model where people are buying cars not because they love them, but because they just feel they have to have them, then that's an excellent business model. Now, not everybody can achieve that, but I'm sure that's the hope of many of these companies.
I guess that's the reason why you shell out for the F80. You're like, yeah, I'll take the V6, because I want to get to
it all comes back to Ferrari.
Midtown V12. Awesome, dude. I'm so glad that you write for us, and it was great to be able to work next to you for a few quick years. a few brief years in the Berlin office, but we'll have to have you on again.
Please do. I loved it. Thank you.
That was Chris Bryant, my old buddy from Berlin. So cool to
so enlightening.
Yeah, to hear from him, and he's so thoughtful on these things. And I know because I lived, well, I didn't live in the office, but I spent a lot of time in the office, and he was one of the other people that was reliably always in the office on Pariser Platz. I can't believe you've never been to Berlin, by the way, Hannah.
I know. I find it shocking myself. I feel like I've been to every other town in Germany, but I have not been to Berlin. And I think that I like it the best.
Yeah, it's definitely up your alley. I feel like you would really appreciate the people and the culture. It's very different from the rest of Germany. You know?
I don't want to rain on Stuttgart, but I have to imagine that Berlin is a little more interesting.
The mustaches in Berlin are ironic as opposed to those in Stuttgart. They're meant very sincerely.
Ironic and iconic. I love it. Have I ever told you my family's from Fulda? The German side of my family.
You did not tell me that.
Oh, yes. The Mullenhauer side, the German side, the Mullenhauers are from Fulda. So I truly have been in a lot of places in Germany, Hamburg, Frankfurt, Munich, Dusseldorf, all of them, but no Berlin.
So none of my family is German, but I went to university there. My brothers, my dad all went to boarding school in Switzerland. So we all speak German, and I have a somewhat of a preference for German cars. I just feel like they're so solidly engineered and built. Stuff doesn't just fall off of a German car like it will with an Italian car or.
No, I just had a really sad thought.
What is it?
Does this mean we're not going to get German cars anymore in the U.S.?
I hope that's not the case. I hope that's not the case.
We need
I do love the U.S. product. So
I don't. It's not competitive.
Oh, come on, man!
It's not competitive.
You got to drive the Escalade IQ, right?
I did, and it's funny you mentioned that. That piece will be in the magazine next week.
All right. So, are you still not allowed to tell us your driving impressions, or?
Oh well, I certainly can. Maybe we talk about it though when it publishes. But in general, I would say best of the bunch. Best of the bunch.
I love, obviously I have a soft spot in my heart for the F-150 and so many different variants, and I love the GM trucks and especially the SUVs, the Tahoe and the Yukon.
We're just going to have to drive Corvettes, I guess.
And Corvettes. Obviously it's a supercar, so I love that one too.
I'm not going to take that bait.
By the way, I have, coming to me today, I am testing out an American, and they say it's the only American-made motorcycle. It's a brand that you cannot yet buy this motorcycle, from which you cannot yet buy this motorcycle, but Buell is going to drop off their new Super Cruiser, or the prototype of their Super Cruiser. You know Buell motorcycles?
I know of them. I don't think I've not ridden one.
Used to be owned by Harley Davidson. They made really cool kind of eclectic bikes. Eric Buell was, his thought was lower the center of gravity as much as possible. So he was he was one of the first, or at least of recent bike makers to put the exhaust under the motorcycle, and then everybody, Ducati started doing it with the Panigales. But Harley, I guess that business somehow failed at Harley Davidson, and I think it went bankrupt. So for 7 years, they couldn't really do anything.
Did you say that they claim that they're the first American?
The only American motorcycle. So what they say is...
What about Harley Davidson?
That's exactly what I said. I was
Harley May.
I ran into the CEO and owner in Austin at the MotoGP, and one of his people was saying that, one of his engineers who was working at the Buell stand, and I said, "What about Harley?" And she said something to the extent of less than half of the components in a Harley Davidson are actually made in America.
That's really splitting hairs. What about Arch motorcycles?
I don't even know if it's true.
What about Zero? I could list you other brands.
I hadn't thought about Zero because I don't think there's a motor That's an electric
You're
bike,
not going
right?
to call a Zero a motorcycle?
It's a child's toy.
On a contingency? It's
No,
so fun.
Maybe, but I would guess they also have componentry that's not all made in America.
Everybody has componentry that's not
Well, this
made
is
in
the
America.
idea of Buell. The idea is that greater than half, like the lion's share, I think they say 70% of their components are made right here in the U.S. of A. And this is something that we are paying a lot more attention to, right? Apparently,
This is true.
Tesla, apparently 60 to 80%. I've heard different estimates. 60 to 80% of their components are made in the U.S. And obviously, the cars for sale here are also assembled here. That's far more than any other car maker. I think with Ford and GM, it's something like 53%, but it's more than that with Honda. Honda's 64%.
Yeah, and also let's not forget that companies like Mercedes and BMW literally are making cars in America.
Right.
So
but
yes, they're
could
not
be with foreign parts, right? Just
Yeah,
because
but
you order all the parts in. And by the way, I was having a discussion with a European motorcycle maker this weekend. They're worried about the tariffs, and they are actually evaluating the idea of just sending the motorcycle here in parts and assembling it.
Yeah.
At a U.S. address.
Of course, because it's all shades of gray. There is not a single car that only uses American-made parts and is assembled in America and sold in. I don't think there's a single one.
No,
Even
you're right.
Karma.
But Tesla is near as damn it to that. I mean, they are pretty close to being fully made in America.
I mean, but Tesla
I know.
could be on its way out.
There's so many things I don't even want to say.
This is the worst of times for Tesla, really.
I'm seeing more and more bumper stickers that say, I bought my Tesla before Elon went crazy.
Yeah, I know.
Or something to that effect.
I know.
And
I mean, this is not meant to be a political statement, but I've never cared where stuff is made. I don't understand why we can't have Italian marble, French wine, Swiss chocolate, Italian leather, British tweed. American luxury is not enough for me.
I suppose
I need the world.
That's fair.
I would like Japanese sake and Scottish whiskey.
Yeah.
These are the best of the best. I want the best of the world. Why don't you want that too?
No, I totally do. But I think there are a few different issues. One is, obviously the populist drive is to give jobs to people that live here, right? And then I do care a lot of times where my clothing is made,
do you
or
really?
my tools,
Japan.
But that's because I want high quality stuff.
Right.
So I know,
Right.
if I buy something that's woven, cut, and sewn in America, it's just. Or in Japan, obviously, it's just likely to be higher quality than if some 11-year-old puts it together in Sri Lanka, right?
But the fact that you're buying Japanese denim implies that you're not satisfied with the denim in America. You're not wearing Levi's.
I'm mostly not, but that's because, the old looms that were made back when American jeans were high quality were sold to the Japanese after World War II.
I know. You know what's really wild? I was just at Levi's special atelier, and they were saying how difficult it is to source vintage Levi's because for their VIPs and stuff.
Yeah.
It's extremely hard. And they were saying exactly what you said, which is we were so stupid to give away all of those looms to Japan. Because now Japan just runs the market. They're so smart. And, kudos to them for that.
True. And now I have to use ChatGPT to translate all of my letters into Japanese, and then I send them to the flathead, and I say, "Please send me these T-shirts." And
I just don't want to. I don't want to lose all of these beautiful luxury things that we've become accustomed to. We've become accustomed to a certain level of lifestyle, and
first world problems.
Of course, but I'm a first world girl.
I don't want to lose, to Chris's point, also the affordability, right? I mean, I want people in this country to be able to get good paying jobs without being, incredibly gifted, talented, extraordinary people, right? Just go to a job, make enough money to raise a family. On the other hand, if those products aren't going to be affordable to any of those people, what's the point? I guess I was thinking yesterday, maybe not everybody gets to drive a car. Is that the idea? Like, not everybody needs to have access to this
I would love it if
technology?
we could all ride bicycles everywhere, honestly. I think that would be, first of all, it'd for sure be a better world if everyone rode motorcycles or bicycles. No question about that.
Yeah, motorcycles
Right?
for sure, yeah.
And second of all, even in other countries, the people who are assembling Ferraris and Rolls Royces are not purchasing Ferraris and Rolls Royces.
Good
There's
point.
nothing unusual about that.
That's a good
You
point.
know,
But
the
if
people
you're
who are sewing in Dior's workshops are not wearing Dior couture.
if you're assembling, a pickup truck at the Rouge, you should be able to afford to buy that pickup truck. That was the idea with Henry Ford, right? I'm going to pay them $5 a day so that they can buy the Model T or whatever it was.
I'm more capitalist than that.
I learn more and more things about you every day, Hannah. You got anything cool coming up?
I'm driving a Volvo this week. Last week have you
A
had
Chinese car.
Yeah. Have you had the AMG CLE Mercedes? Speaking of German
man.
cars.
I have not, but I am a huge fan of the CLE.
Yeah.
I think it's a sleeper hit.
Completely. I was like, what? Loved it. Really loved it.
Which one is it? The 53 or the 63?
The 53. I'm looking at the Maroni right now, actually. It's the 53, the AMG starting price $72,800, which
Is it
is
an
cheaper
inline
than the
six,
Escalade, or the whatever SUV you mentioned. Yeah, it's an inline six, 443 horsepower, and that's all you need. That's
For sure.
that's really all you need.
But wait, we're talking about a coupe, right? Why would you
Yeah.
compare it to the Escalade?
Well, because you just mentioned earlier that not an Escalade, but whatever, the Silverado or I don't know, some
the
Suburban
Suburban.
you are. I can't remember all these.
Suburban.
Yeah, and you mentioned it was like 86,000, and I'm
to
saying
start
this
without options.
This incredible luxury product, AMG no less, starts at 72. I actually
Yeah.
think that's a rather good deal.
No, they are
I loved it.
amazing to drive. They're so, I love the
It was
interior
so
is
cool.
so luxurious.
It looked
and,
good too. It looked
and-
super good.
To be fair, you can get a Suburban with the 5.3 liter, the tried and true V8 for much less. But I'm just saying, if you want the 6.2, you got to pay up.
Yeah. Also, I did have the Urus SE, which I think we've already talked about. I had that
Wait, the
last
what?
week too. The Lamborghini Urus.
Oh, the Urus,
The one
yeah,
you
yeah.
did. The one
Yeah,
you did.
yeah.
Which only we don't need to get into it other than to say it only confirmed my thought that it's the best SUV on the market right now. Period.
I
Not
think
saying it's my
very
favorite,
nice.
but I'm saying it's the best.
Do you feel like when you close the doors, there's not that solidity that you want from an SUV? I feel like the door's made of carbon fiber.
If you want solidity, you're going to have to go with the G.
That's
Let's be
right.
honest. I mean, speaking of
Agreed.
favorites.
Agreed.
but what are you doing this weekend?
All right, let's see. This weekend, I'm just going to be driving this Buell. I'm riding this
Oh, that's
Buell.
cool.
I'm going to ride this Buell American-made motorcycle like an hour north of here to Danbury, Connecticut, where I will test drive a Road King. And we have yet to determine how American that is, but I'm going to test drive a Road King to see if I prefer it to the Fat Bob. And
Is this this is one that's for sale specifically?
Yes.
That you might be coming home with.
yeah, well, I mean, I'm
Potentially.
pretty sure I want the Fat Bob. I rented it with Riders Share in Austin over the weekend, and I had a great experience with
It was
that. It's
good.
like the Turo of motorcycles. Yeah. So
Cool.
I have a 2-wheel weekend ahead of me.
Wow, I feel like you're riding more bikes than ever these days.
It's not since, I mean, before I had kids, it was every day. But
I get it.
But now, whenever I can. Awesome. Well, that's all for this week, I guess. We'll see each other back here, same time, same place next week. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Bloomberg.